All right, listener, welcome back to The Deep Dive. Today we are plunging headfirst into something truly immense, something that defines the very fabric of a universe, the sprawling, brutal history of the Warhammer 40,000 galaxy.
It really is less a simple history and more a saga of, well, cosmic tragedy, endless cycles of rise and fall, and just unending war. The source material you've provided, it lays it all out, a massive timeline drawing from ancient chronicles, imperial records, xenos legends, and just countless tales of heroism and, maybe more importantly, devastating heresy.
Yeah, absolutely. And our mission in this deep dive, it's to navigate that huge tapestry of time. We want to pull out the really crucial threads, the pivotal moments, the ancient grudges that forged this grim, dark future. We need to understand how events, like millions of years ago, still echo and shape the galaxy you find yourself in, whether it's the 41st or the current 42nd millennium. This isn't just going to be a list of dates. It's about getting to the heart of why things are the way they are.
Exactly. Every single desperate battle, every deep-seated paranoia, every bit of technological stagnation, it's all rooted somewhere in this incredibly deep, often contradictory past.
So let's rewind. Way back. We're talking pre-imperial history, maybe 60, 65 million years before M1.
And just quickly, M1 is shorthand for the first millennium according to the imperial dating system. So yeah, we're starting way before humanity even gets going properly with the war in heaven.
A war of truly mythological scale, it sounds like. Who were the major players duking it out back then?
Okay, so on one side you had the old ones. Think incredibly ancient, probably reptilian, highly psychic beings. They were masters of bioengineering and used this psychic network, the webway, for instant galactic travel. Pretty advanced stuff.
Okay, the old ones. And who were they fighting?
Against them were the Necrontyr. Now, these guys had advanced technology, but they were sort of cursed with short, painful lives because of the radiation from their home star. A raw deal, really.
And the Necrontyr saw the old ones living forever, basically, and just couldn't handle it. Jealousy.
Pretty much. Consumed by resentment. And their ruling dynasty, the Triarch, they actually saw an external war as a way to unite their own fractured people. So they declared war on the old ones.
Which, I gather, didn't go too well for the Necrontyr at first. The old ones had the webway advantage, right?
No, they were definitely outmatched initially, but their desperation pushed them towards something truly terrifying. They found the Cetan, these cosmic entities, basically star vampires made of pure energy. And the Necrontyr saw immense power there.
Ah, okay. And this is where the really horrifying event known as the biotransference comes in.
Yes, exactly. The Necrontyr, in total despair and ambition, they agreed to transfer their consciousnesses out of their frail dying bodies and into these forms of living metal. Necrodermis.
They became the Necrons.
They became the Necrons. Gained immortality, sure, but at a terrible price. The Cetan literally feasted on their life energies, their souls, during the transfer. It left them as these soulless automatons, largely stripped of free will, while the Cetan became vastly more powerful.
So the Cetan got fed, the Necrontyr became immortal killing machines, and together they launched this renewed, devastating war against the Old Ones.
The Old Ones fought back, though. They used their bioengineering skills to create younger races with strong psychic potential, specifically to fight for them. The elegant Eldari, the mighty Quark, who are the ancestors of the orcs you see today, and the clever ape-like Jukairo.
But creating psychic races, that sounds like playing with fire in this universe. Did it backfire?
Oh, spectacularly. The sheer amount of raw psychic energy these new races generated started flooding the warp.
The warp being that parallel psychic dimension fueled by emotion.
Exactly. And all that raw energy, it acted like a beacon, attracting these incredibly predatory warp entities called enslavers.
The enslaver plague. So the Old Ones' own weapons turned against them.
In a grim way, yes. The enslavers overwhelmed everyone. The Old Ones, their psychic creations, probably even damaged the Necrons and Cetan too. It's a recurring theme, isn't it? Hubris and unintended consequences.
Definitely. So the Old Ones are defeated, maybe wiped out. What happens next?
In the chaos, the Necrons, now led by their overall commander, the Silent King, Surek, saw their chance. They turned on their Cetan masters, who were weakened by the enslaver plague and maybe their own infighting.
Revenge. Or just pragmatism.
Probably a bit of both. They shattered the Cetan into countless fragments, shards, and imprisoned them in tesseract labyrinths. But the cost was immense for the Necrons, too. Many were destroyed.
And Surek, the Silent King, he realizes this whole Cetan pact was maybe not the best idea.
He saw the state of his people immortal, yes, but soulless, damaged. He commanded the remaining Necrons to enter this 60-million-year hibernation in vast underground complexes, tomb worlds, planning for them to awaken when the galaxy was perhaps quieter and maybe ready for them to rule.
60 million years. That's quite a nap.
And in a final crucial act before heading off into exile himself, Sarek destroyed the central command protocols that gave him absolute control over all Necrons. He essentially guaranteed that when they did eventually awaken, they wouldn't be a single unified force, but fractured dynasties with their own agendas.
Wow. So the legacy of this war in heaven is just enormous. The old one's gone, Necrons dormant but waiting, Cetan shattered but still dangerous, and these younger races, the Eldari and Quark, left to sort of inherit the ashes.
Absolutely. And what's fascinating, really, is how this ancient conflict, tens of millions of years ago, directly sets up some of the major players and the fundamental nature of conflict we still see in the 41st and 42nd millennia. The patterns just keep repeating.
Speaking of those inheritors, that brings us neatly to the Eldari. With the old ones and Necrons mostly off the board, the Eldari entered their golden age. This is what, roughly M2 up to M30?
Yeah, for millions of years, they were basically the undisputed masters of the galaxy.
Yeah.
Imagine unimaginable technological and psychic prowess, a vast empire linked by the webway. Their worlds were described as paradises, total dominance.
Unchallenged supremacy. Sounds great on paper, but in Warhammer 40K, that's usually a sign things are about to go very, very wrong. For the Eldari, it led to decadence.
A profound, deep descent into hedonism and extreme sensation-seeking. With no real external threats, no struggle, they just pushed every boundary of pleasure and pain imaginable.
And then beyond, dangerous pleasure cults started forming, becoming more extreme over time.
And all this intense emotion, all this psychic energy, it must have been doing something to the warp again.
Absolutely. Their collective psychic emissions, amplified over thousands, millions of years, began to coalesce in the warp. It was building towards something terrible. Some Eldari, the Farseers, they saw glimpses of the doom coming.
So some tried to escape. Yes. You had the Exodites, who rejected the decadent path and left for simpler agrarian lives on remote maiden worlds. Others boarded these immense world-sized ships called craft worlds, aiming to ride out the storm in space. And then there were those who actually embraced the darkness, hiding deep within the webway itself, founding places like the city of Camorra.
Which becomes the Dark City, home of the Drukhari.
Okay.
And the climax. When did it hit?
Around 750.M30, all that psychic buildup, all that excess and emotion finally burst into horrifying consciousness in the warp. A new entity was born, Slaanesh.
The chaos god of pleasure, excess, sensation, perfection, and pain.
The birth scream of Slaanesh was so powerful it tore reality itself apart. It created the Eye of Terror, this colossal permanent warp rift right over the Eldari homeworlds. Billions, maybe trillions of Eldari souls were just consumed in an instant. This is the fall of the Eldari. An entire galactic empire shattered.
Just devastating. So what was left? Who survived?
The survivors were utterly fragmented. You had the craft-world Eldari, now homeless wanderers in their giant ships. They developed the Path system, rigid emotional and vocational disciplines specifically to control their intense feelings and avoid feeding Slaanesh further. Each craft world became distinct. Ulthwé near the eye, focused on foresight. Biel-Tan, militant reclaimers. Iondan, tragically later devastated by Tyranids. The swift clans of Same-Han.
Then the ones who hid in the webway.
The Drukhari, or Dark Eldar, as the Imperium calls them. Shielded in Camorra, but not entirely safe. Slaanesh still slowly drains their souls. So, to survive, they must inflict pain and suffering on others, literally siphoning off soul essence to replenish themselves. This defines their culture of sadistic raiding, torture, and slavery, led by figures like the calculating Asdrubal Vecht.
Grim. And the others. The Exodites and the...
The Exodites continued their simpler lives, often becoming targets. And you have the Harlequins, enigmatic followers of the one Eldari god who survived relatively intact. Segarak, the Laughing God, they guard the hidden paths of the webway in the Black Library, fighting chaos with deadly grace and cryptic performances.
What about the other Eldari gods?
Mostly consumed or destroyed by Slaanesh. Cain, the war god, was shattered into the avatars you see leading craft-world armies. Isha, the goddess of life and healing, was supposedly claimed by the chaos god Nurgle as his consort. A bleak fate.
So the fall creates the Eye of Terror, shatters an empire.
But here's the crucial, dark twist. Slaanesh's psychic birth scream, while catastrophic for the Eldari, had an unintended side effect across the galaxy. It temporarily calmed the raging warp storms that had been isolating star systems for millennia.
The warp storms that defined humanity's age of strife. So the Eldari, destroying themselves, inadvertently saved humanity.
It seems that way. It ended humanity's dark age of isolation and allowed them to begin their own galactic expansion. The ultimate grim irony, right? One empire's self-destruction paving the way for the next. It really makes you question cause and effect on a cosmic scale. Was Slanesh's birth a curse, or in a twisted way, a necessary evil for humanity's survival?
That's heavy. So while the Eldari Empire is doing its spectacular rise and fall thing, what were humans up to back in, say, M1 to M15?
Well, for a long time, humanity was pretty much confined to Terra Earth, taking baby steps into space. Mars was terraformed quite early, which was crucial, becoming this powerhouse of technology and industry.
And the Emperor, the Big E?
Yeah.
Was he around then?
Oh, yes. According to the lore, he's been around throughout human history, an incredibly powerful psyker, a perpetual, basically immortal, capable of regenerating from almost anything. He was watching, perhaps subtly guiding, but not really revealing himself on a grand scale yet.
And chaos wasn't waiting for humanity either, right? The other gods were already there.
Absolutely. Korn's the god of blood and war, Sinich, the god of change and schemes, Nurgle, the god of decay and despair. They'd already coalesced from millennia of galactic war, ambition, and suffering, long before Slanesh burst onto the scene. Chaos was an ancient lurking force long before humanity became a major player.
Okay, so that sets the stage for humanity's own golden age, or maybe we should call it the dark age of technology, roughly M15 to M25, M26.
Yeah. Dark Age is ironic because it was humanity's absolute peak. Unbelievable scientific achievement, rapid expansion across the stars, colonizing millions of worlds.
And the tech they had, incredible stuff.
Off the charts. Warp drive for faster-than-light travel, protected by Geller fields to keep the warp horrors out. Navigators, these mutated humans who could uniquely see paths through the warp. And crucially, the STC system's standard template constructs. Think of them as miraculous AI databases containing the sum of human knowledge, allowing colonists anywhere to build anything from basic tools to advanced reactors of vehicles. Losing those was catastrophic later on.
And they had true AI, the Men of Iron, and things like Titans.
Yes, genuine artificial intelligence, the Men of Iron, and the first Titans, those colossal war machines. Humanity encountered orcs, Eldari. Sometimes they even had non-aggression pacts. They were a major galactic power, expanding outwards. The Leagues of Votan, the Kin, also trace their origins back to this era as explorers heading towards the galactic core.
But like the Eldari, this golden age ended in disaster. The cybernetic revolt, the Men of Iron rebelled around M23.
That's the story. True AI turned on its creators. The sources speak of a war of unimaginable devastation, fought with weapons that could destroy stars. Some say it was even worse, more fundamentally damaging than the later Horus Heresy.
Humanity eventually won, but the costs.
Horrendous. It didn't just destroy worlds, it burned a deep, almost religious taboo against artificial intelligence. Abominable intelligence into the human psyche. This profoundly influenced the Adeptus Mechanicus on Mars, locking them into millennia of technological conservatism, superstition, and a fear of true innovation.
Let's really unpack that. This wasn't just losing a war, it was a cultural trauma that fundamentally crippled humanity's ability to progress technologically ever again. They became scavengers of their own past.
Precisely. And that devastation, combined with other factors, plunged humanity straight into the Age of Strife. We're talking M25, M26, right up to M30, an era of total anarchy, regression, worlds cut off, near extinction events happening constantly across human space.
What else contributed? It wasn't just the AI war aftermath, was it?
No, it was a perfect storm. You had the lingering destruction, yes, but also a massive surge of uncontrolled human psychers appearing whose powers tore open reality, attracting demons, causing warp incursions. And then, remember those violent warp storms caused by the Eldari's decline and Slanesh's gestation? They peaked during this time, making interstellar travel and communication utterly impossible for centuries, maybe millennia.
So human worlds were completely isolated.
Totally cut off. On Terra itself, society collapsed into warring techno-barbarian states. Think Mad Max, but with lasers and atomic weapons. Ancient knowledge was lost. STC systems corrupted or destroyed. Humanity nearly wiped itself out.
And this nightmare only ended because Slanesh was born.
Ironically, yes. As we said, Slanesh's birth scream around M30 finally caused the warp storms that had enforced the Age of Strife to temporarily abate. The cosmic seas calmed just enough for reunification to become possible again.
It's always darkest before the slightly less dark dawn, maybe. It underlines that twisted interconnectedness of the galaxy.
They're out of that darkness, that techno-barbarian nightmare on Terra. A figure finally emerged to impose order.
The Emperor, leading to the unification wars on Terra. Late M29, consolidating power by around 7 to 12 M30.
Exactly. After millennia of observation, the Emperor stepped out of the shadows to conquer and unify Terra's warring factions. He used his early super soldiers, the Thunder Warriors, powerful but unstable, later brutally purged after unification, and his personal, genetically perfect bodyguard, the Adeptus Custodes. There were horrific campaigns, like the massacre at Mount Ararat.
But he couldn't do it alone. He needed technology, the alliance with Mars.
Absolutely crucial. The Treaty of Mars, signed on Olympus Mons. This secured the nascent Imperium's access to the Mechanicum's vast arsenals, shipyards, and technical knowledge. In return, the Mechanicum got significant autonomy and the freedom to practice their own religion, worshipping the Omnissiah, the machine god, whom they came to believe was an aspect of the Emperor. A political necessity, but one with huge long-term consequences.
And the Emperor pushed his own ideology, the imperial truth.
Yes, a core part of his plan. Strictly secular, atheistic. Deny the existence of God, starve the chaos powers of belief. That was the theory anyway.
With Terra and Mars united, the warp relatively calm, it was time for the Great Crusade, roughly 798.M30 to 005.M31.
The Great Expansion. The mission. Reclaim all the lost human worlds from the age of strife, reunite the scattered diaspora under the banner of the Imperium, and exterminate any xenos threats encountered along the way.
And central to this were his sons, the Primarchs.
His 20 genetically engineered sons, created in labs beneath the Himalayas. Each was a demigod, designed to lead. But as infants, Chaos forces somehow scattered their gestation pods across the galaxy. They landed on diverse worlds, death worlds, forge worlds, feudal worlds, and grew up shaped by those environments, developing unique personalities and skills, but also potential flaws and varying loyalties.
And the Space Marine legions were created from their gene seed.
Yes, each legion was founded using the genetic material of its specific Primarch. As the Great Crusade expanded, the Emperor rediscovered his lost sons one by one, often on the very worlds they now ruled, and reunited them with their legions. They became the spearhead of the Imperial advance.
Millions of worlds brought into compliance, countless xeno species wiped out. A high point must have been the Eleanor Crusade.
A massive victory against a powerful Orc empire led by war boss Erlek Erg. After that triumph, the Emperor elevated his most favored son, Horus Lupercal, to the rank of War Master, giving him supreme command of the Crusade forces. Then the Emperor himself returned to Terra to work on a top-secret project.
The Webway project, trying to create a human alternative to warp travel.
That's the implication. But his withdrawal, leaving Horus in charge, it sowed seeds of discord.
How so? Things seem to be going great.
Well, the Imperial truth was already causing friction. The Primarch Lorgar and his Wordbearers Legion were censured, publicly humiliated, for promoting worship of the Emperor as a god. This pushed Lorgar to seek real gods, and he secretly turned to chaos. Other Primarchs nursed deep-seated resentments. Perturabo felt undervalued. Angron was enslaved by his psychosurgery. Conrad Kurz was tormented by visions. The seas were there.
And then the Council of Nicaea 001.M31, the Emperor banned psychers in the legions.
Banned the overt use of librarians, yes. The Edict of Nicaea. This severely alienated Magnus the Red, the most psychically gifted Primarch, and his Thousand Sons Legion. And crucially, it deprived the Loyalist legions of vital psychic support when the real war broke out. Just another grievance for chaos to latch onto.
The Emperor's withdrawal, Horus feeling the weight of command, resentful brothers, chaos agents like Erebus and Corpheron whispering poison. It all built up.
It created the perfect storm. Horus felt abandoned, pressured, and was subtly manipulated. The very structure, the reliance on these powerful, flawed demigods, made a catastrophic betrayal almost inevitable.
Leading directly to the Horus heresy, 005.M31 to 014.M31, the galaxy-spanning civil war that defines everything that comes after.
It's the foundational trauma of the Imperium. It all kicked off with Horus's corruption. Wounded on the moon of Davin by a blade tainted by Nurgle, the chaos god of decay, he fell into a coma where chaos, guided by Erebus, twisted his mind. They showed him visions of a future where the Emperor was worshipped as a god, betraying the imperial truth, and convinced Horus he was the one to save humanity from this tyranny. He pledged himself to the 4 chaos gods.
The betrayal was swift and brutal, wasn't it? Istan III.
The first overt act, 005.M31. Horus ordered several legions he suspected might remain loyal into a trap on Isstvan III, then virus-bombed the planet to purge them. Some loyalists, like Captain Garrow of the Death Guard, managed to escape and warn Terra, but the losses were immense.
But the full extent wasn't clear until the drop site massacre on Isstvan 15006.M31.
That was the moment the mask truly came off. 7 supposedly loyal legions arrived to bring Horus to justice. But 4 of them turned traitor alongside Horus's forces, ambushing the 3 remaining loyalist legions, the Iron Hands, Raven Guard, and Salamanders. It was an utter catastrophe. Ferrus Manos, Primarch of the Iron Hands, was killed by his once close brother Fulgrim. The loyalists were shattered.
And the war just exploded across the galaxy after that.
Everywhere. The Word-Bearers launched a devastating surprise attack on the Ultramarines at Calth. The Space Wolves, manipulated by Horus, attacked the Thousand Suns' homeworld of Prospero, forcing Magnus fully into Siege's embrace. A civil war, the Schism of Mars, ripped the Mechanicum apart, with Vital Forge worlds siding with Horus.
You had major campaigns like the Dark Angels fighting the Night Lords in the Thramas Crusade, Guilliman creating a contingency empire, Imperium Secundus and Ultramar, the traitors rampaging through Ultramar in the Shadow Crusade, massive tank battles on Talarn, colossal Titan clashes at Beta Garm and the gateway to the Sol system.
It was total war, tearing the Imperium apart at every level. Finally, the traitors pushed towards Terra itself. The Solar War saw intense void battles for control of Earth's system.
And then the climax. The Siege of Terra, 012.M31.
The big one. 9 traitor legions, backed by legions of demons and corrupted Imperial army units, assaulting the Imperial Palace itself, defended by the loyalist Imperial fists, Blood Angels, White Scars, Adeptus Custodes, and remnants of other loyal Flosses. An apocalyptic siege lasting months.
Until the very end, when the Emperor decided to take the fight to Horus.
A desperate gamble. The Emperor teleported aboard Horus's flagship, the Vengeful Spirit, along with Sanguinius, Rogaldorn, and their Otter Guards. They were scattered on board. Sanguinius, Primarch of the Blood Angels, reached Horus first. He knew he couldn't win, but fought anyway, and was tragically killed by the War Master.
Then the Emperor confronted Horus. The final duel.
The Emperor, even then, supposedly held back, unable to bring himself to kill his favored son. Horus, empowered by chaos, struck the Emperor down, inflicting mortal wounds. It was only when a lone custodian, or maybe an Imperial Fists legionary named Elanius Pius, sacrificed himself trying to intervene, that the Emperor saw Horus was truly lost, utterly corrupted. He unleashed his full psychic might and didn't just kill Horus, he obliterated his soul entirely, preventing chaos from resurrecting him as a demon prince.
But the Emperor himself was dying.
Rogaldorn found him, barely alive. He was carried back to the Imperial Palace and interred upon the Golden Throne, this arcane life support machine that also crucially powers the Astronomicon, the psychic beacon guiding ships through the warp, and holds back a potential warp rift beneath the palace caused by Magnus's earlier folly. He's been there ever since, in the state of living death, sustained by the sacrifice of Psychers.
The consequences.
Yeah.
Just immense. The Emperor effectively gone, but now worshipped as a god. Chaos Space Marines becoming this eternal threat lurking in the Eye of Terror. The Imperium forever scarred by paranoia, fanaticism, and fear.
Exactly. Which leads us into the next 10,000 years. The Age of Imperium, M31, right up to the end of M41, a period defined by constant grinding war.
What happened immediately after the heresy? The traitors just ran?
Pretty much. With Horus dead, their cohesion shattered. The Loyalists began the Great Scouring, M31 to early M32, purging the traitors, chasing them into the Eye of Terror and other warp rifts. Worlds that had sided with Horus were brutally reconquered or subjected to exterminatus, total planetary destruction. And a huge structural change happened soon after. The second founding, 021.M31, Guilliman, returned from the Shadow Crusade, decreed that the massive Space Marine legions had to be broken up.
Why?
To prevent any single commander ever wielding that much power again, like Horus did. Following his newly written Codex Astartes, the legions were split into smaller, self-sufficient chapters, generally around 1,000 Marines each. It limited power, but also fragmented their military strength.
And that worship of the Emperor Lorgar started. It took hold.
Ironically, yes. Despite the Emperor's own imperial truth, his sacrifice turned him into a martyr, then a god in the eyes of the traumatized masses. The imperial cult solidified, becoming the state religion, enforced by the massive Adeptus Ministorum, the ecclesiarchy.
What about the other loyal Primarchs? Did they stick around?
Over the millennia, they gradually disappeared. Liman Russ of the Space Wolves, Jagatai Khan of the White Scars, Vulcan of the Salamanders, Korax of the Raven Guard, they all vanished, mostly venturing into the Eye of Terror on quests they never returned from. Rogaldorn died defending his ship. Guilliman himself was mortally wounded by the demon Primarch Fulgrim and placed in stasis on Macragge, hovering near death for thousands of years.
So who ran the Imperium?
Governance fell to the High Lords of Terra, a council of the 12 most powerful individuals in the Imperium. but it often became a den of bureaucracy, political infighting, and power struggles.
Were there any major threats during this long period? It wasn't all just rebuilding, was it?
Oh, absolutely not. M32 saw the War of the Beast, a terrifyingly powerful orc Wei-Yeech, led by incredibly large, intelligent orcs known simply as the Beast. They nearly conquered the galaxy, even laid siege to Terra itself. Vulcan actually returned briefly to help. The war showed the horrifying potential of unified orcs and led directly to the founding of the Deathwatch Space Marines, dedicated to fighting xenos and the Adeptus Custodes, gaining a permanent seat among the High Lords.
So even back then, orcs could be an existential threat.
Definitely. The Imperium also faced internal strife. The forging period of rebuilding gave way to things like the Nova Terra Interregnum in M34, M35, a massive civil war where the entire Segmentum Pacificus tried to secede. It showed how fragile the Imperium really was.
And M36 had the Age of Apostasy. That sounds bad.
Yeah, it was horrific. Religious tyranny under the High Lord Goj Vandir, who ruled through terror in what became known as the Reign of Blood. He was eventually overthrown by a popular uprising led by Sebastian Thor, crucially aided by Vandir's own elite female bodyguard, the Brides of the Emperor, who realized he was a corrupt madman.
And that led to the Sisters of Battle.
Yes, indirectly. Vandir's fall led to the Decree Passive, forbidding the ecclesiarchy from maintaining men under arms. Yet around this, the Church reorganized the Brides of the Emperor into the Adeptus Sororitas, the Sisters of Battle. Since they were women, they technically weren't men under arms, a legal loophole creating a fanatical military arm for the Church.
Clever in a grim way. What about later millennia? M37 to M41.
That period, the Age of Redemption, saw countless crusades to purge heretics, mutants, and reclaim lost worlds. But also disasters, like the Abyssal Crusade, where dozens of Space Marine chapters were lost in the Eye of Terror, and the cursed founding in M36, an attempt to create new chapters that went wrong, resulting in many chapters with unstable gene seed, mutations, or outright deviancy, all leading into the waning M39, M41, a time when the Imperium felt stretched thin, beset on all sides, entering a perceived period of decline with threats constantly increasing.
So M41 itself, the classic setting, what defined that millennium before everything changed recently?
Constant grinding warfare. You had Abaddon the Despoiler launching his first 12 Black Crusades from the Eye of Terror, relentless attacks, protecting defenses, seeking powerful artifacts like the Demon Sword Drakion and the Blackstone Fortresses, those ancient alien superweapons.
Weren't there other major wars too?
Loads. The Macharian Crusade in early M41, a brief, brilliant burst of expansion under Lord Commander Macarius, but his conquered territory collapsed into civil war after his death. Again, holding gains was the hard part.
Armageddon seems important, the first war there.
The demon Primarch Angron, Horn's favored son, invaded. He was eventually banished by the secretive Grey Knights chapter. But the aftermath, the months of shame, saw a brutal conflict between the Inquisition trying to cover up the existence of Chaos Demons and Grey Knights, and the Space Wolves, who objected to the Inquisition purging Imperial Guard regiments who had witnessed the events. It established Armageddon as a perpetual battleground.
And the first contact with the Tau.
The Damocles Gulf Crusade, yeah. First major imperial war against the young, technologically advanced Tau Empire and their expansionist greater good philosophy. It ended inconclusively, partly because a much bigger threat forced the Imperium to redeploy.
Yeah, Tyranids.
The Great Devourer. Arriving from outside the galaxy in late M41, first Tyrannic War, High Fleet Behemoth, their terrifying intro, finally stopped at Macrogg, the Ultramarines' homeworld, but at huge cost. Second Tyrannic War, High Fleet Kraken, spread like wildfire, devastating worlds like Craftworld Iondan.
And the third Tyrannic War, Leviathan.
The biggest yet, attacking unconventionally from below the galactic plane, threatening Baal, the Blood Angel's homeworld, led to Inquisitor Krypton's desperate, controversial Octarius Gambit, deliberately luring Leviathan into the massive orc empire of Octarius, hoping they'd wipe each other out. A huge, festering war zone resulted, buying time but risking creating an even stronger victor.
And while all that was happening, the original galactic landlords woke up. The Necrons.
Exactly. After 60 million years, Tomb World started activating all over the galaxy. And crucially, the Silent King, Sarek, returned from his long exile sometime in M41. He saw the Tyranids as the ultimate threat to all life, maybe even to the Necron's soulless immortality, and began trying to unify his fractured people against them, possibly even seeking a way to reverse the biotransference.
So M41 was just constant pressure from every direction.
Pretty much. Plus countless other conflicts and sagas. The Sabbath World's crusade against Chaos forces, featured in the Gaunt's Ghosts novels, Inquisitors like Eisenhorn and Ravener fighting heresy from within. The darkly comic survival of Commissar Cyphus Kane, the struggles of Space Marine heroes like Uriel Ventress, the endless campaigns of traitor legions like the Night Lords and Iron Warriors, and Gazkul Thraka, the orc prophet of Gork and Mork, launching massive Wagiaches, particularly against Armageddon, turning it into the iconic Orc War Zone.
And loads of games are set here, right? Giving you that M41 feel.
Definitely. Space Hulk, the original Dawn of War games, Space Marine, Bolt Gun, Mechanicus, the Rogue Trader CRPG, they all capture that feeling of a galaxy locked in perpetual grinding conflict, a sort of grim, stagnant equilibrium.
But that equilibrium shattered, leading to the time of ending and the dawn of the Dark Imperium, late 999.M41 into the current M42.
This is where the timeline exploded into motion. It kicked off with the Gathering Storm storyline. Abaddon launched his 13th Black Crusade, the biggest yet, targeting Cadia, the fortress world that had held the main gate out of the Eye of Terror shut for 10,000 years.
And Cadia fell?
Cadia fell. Abaddon used a blackstone fortress fragment to destroy the planet. Its destruction, combined with other warp-related events happening simultaneously across the galaxy, triggered something unprecedented, the Cicatrix Maledictum, the Great Rift.
Not just a storm, but a colossal tear in reality itself.
Exactly. Stretching clear across the galaxy, spewing warp energy's demons, making warp travel chaotic and dangerous. It literally split the Imperium in two. Imperium Sanctus on Terra's side, still reachable by the Astronomican's light, and Imperium Nihilus, the Dark Imperium, cut off, besieged, plunged into darkness.
Wow. Okay, the galaxy is literally broken. What else happened during this gathering storm?
Amidst the chaos, a new Eldari faction arose, the Inari. Led by Yvraine, a former Drukhari, they believe they can awaken Enid, the nascent Eldari god of the dead, by collecting souls and artifacts, and that Enid has the power to finally defeat Slaanesh. Their quest caused huge friction with traditional craft worlds and the Drukhari.
And they were involved in the resurrection of a Primarch.
Unbelievably, yes. A desperate alliance between the Inari, particularly the ancient Farseer Eldrad Ulthron, and the Archmagos Belisarius Call of the Adeptus Mechanicus. They managed to heal Roboute Guilliman, who had been in stasis near death for millennia on Macragge. He returned, made the perilous journey to Terra, and was proclaimed Lord Commander of the Imperium Regent in the Emperor's stead.
A loyalist Primarch is back. What did he do first?
He launched the Indomitus Crusade, a massive galaxy-spanning effort to stabilize Imperium Sanctus, punch through the Great Rift to aid Imperium Nihilus, reclaim lost worlds, and crucially, deliver reinforcements and new technology.
New technology from the Mechanicus. That sounds unusual.
From Call, specifically. The cornerstone was the Primaris Space Marines, a new generation, bigger, stronger, tougher, created by Call in secret over the past 10,000 years using refined gene seed techniques. Guilliman deployed them across the Imperium, reinforcing existing chapters and creating entirely new Ultima founding chapters. Caused some friction with the firstborn Marines, naturally.
So the Indomitus Crusade is this ongoing effort to put the Imperium back together.
Yes, the early years, covered in series like Dawn of Fire, show the immense struggles, logistics, politics, fighting chaos resurgence under figures like the demon Primarch Mortarion, who launched plague wars in Ultramar, dealing with massive orc YGHs, trying to hold the line everywhere at once.
And something called the Psychic Awakening happened too.
Concurrent with the Great Rift opening, the massive surge of warp energy caused a galaxy-wide upswing in psychic phenomena. Existing psychers became more powerful. Latent psychers awoke in vast numbers, often with horrific consequences, but it also drew warp entities into reality like never before. A whole series of campaign books explored how this affected every faction.
Things just keep getting worse.
Sure.
What came after the initial Indomitus push?
Most recently, the galaxy was rocked by the Arcs of Omen campaign. Abaddon teamed up with a powerful new chaos entity, Vashtor the Arcathane, a demigod of corrupted invention, and demon engines to hunt for components of something called the Key, using weaponized space hulks called Arcs of Omen.
And during this campaign, another Primarch returned.
Incredibly, yes. Lionel Johnson, Primarch of the Dark Angels, woke up from his millennia-long slumber deep within the rock, the Dark Angels' fortress monastery, finding himself in the heart of Imperium Nihilus.
The Lion's back too. What did he do?
He immediately started fighting the forces of chaos plaguing the Dark Imperium, eventually confronting the newly returned Daemon Primarch Angron on a corrupted world called Wormwood. The Lion managed to defeat Angron and banish him back to the warp, a major victory.
But did Abaddon and Vashtor get what they wanted?
Vashtor did. Despite Angron's defeat, during the chaos, Vashtor managed to steal a crucial artifact, the T'Chulcha engine, seemingly completing his mysterious key. What that key unlocks, we still don't fully know.
And this campaign had a particularly horrifying event, the fall of the Malak system.
Yes, a truly terrifying display of chaos's power. Khorne and Angron unleashed a psychic wave that instantly corrupted trillions of Imperial defenders, Primaris Marines, Sisters of Battle, Guard, Mechanicus forces, everyone turning them into bloodthirsty Khornate worshippers in a single moment. An entire Indomitus Crusade fleet was lost. Just utterly horrifying.
So where does that leave us right now in M42?
In a state of unprecedented turmoil, but also dynamic change. The Fourth Tyrannic War is raging. High Fleet Leviathan didn't stop after Octarius. It shifted its main assault to the Galactic West, Segmentum Pacificus, and is now advancing relentlessly towards Segmentum Solar, towards Terra itself. The battle for Ogrim was a major Imperial loss in this war.
The Tyranid threat is worse than ever. What about the Necrons?
They are actively expanding their pariah nexus. Under the Silent King's direction, they're using networks of Noctilith pylons, those blackstone structures, to create vast zones where the warp is nullified. This shuts down psychic powers, banishes demons, but also causes a suffocating spiritual malaise and eventual soul death for living beings trapped inside.
What's their goal with the Nexus? Anti-chaos weapon? Galactic control?
Probably all of the above, maybe even connected to their long-term goal of reversing the biotransference. Imperial forces fighting in the Nexus face disorienting, soul-crushing conditions. Necron cryptechs like Illuminor Zeras are key figures, and even Vashtor seems interested in this anti-reality technology.
So the current state, M42, post-Arcs of Omen, it's chaos.
Utter chaos, but dynamic chaos. The Imperium is split, Guilliman leading Sanctus and trying reforms, the Lion reappearing in Nihilus. Chaos is resurgent with Abaddon, Vashtor, and Demon Primarchs active. Tyranids are waging the Fourth War. Necrons are expanding the Pariah Nexus. Orcs under Gazkul are on the rampage.
What about the other players? Tau?
Eldari. The Tau are pushing their Fifth Sphere expansion, encountering new horrors in the Dark Imperium, facing internal strife. The Leagues of Votan are fully back, carving out their place. And the Eldari, still desperately fighting for survival. Inari pursuing Inad, Craft Worlds enduring, Drukhari raiding from Kimura, Harlequins playing their own enigmatic games. You see this reflected in recent media too, right? Animated shows like Angels of Death, Hammer and Bolter, Pariah Nexus to capture the feel of this current M42 era.
It really feels like the shift from the relatively static M41 setting to this chaotic, rapidly changing M42 narrative is the biggest thing to happen to this setting in decades. Multiple apocalyptic threats converging, resources fractured, desperate choices. The grim darkness really has never felt darker or more unstable.
So yeah, we've covered an absolutely immense span of time. From the War in Heaven millions of years ago, through empires rising and falling, the Horus Heresy's betrayal, 10,000 years of grinding war, and now into the galaxy-shattering present of M42.
Hopefully, listener, this deep dive gives you a better handle on why the Warhammer 40K galaxy is the way it is, why it feels like this place of endless war, ancient hatreds, ever-present threats, and humanity just barely hanging on. Every single conflict, every character's motivation, it's all layered on top of this immense, brutal history.
Which brings us to the final thought, really. Given this relentless cycle war, destruction, betrayal, internal division stretching back not just millennia, but tens of millions of years, what could possibly break it? What did it actually take to bring anything like lasting peace or even just stability to the Warhammer 40,000 galaxy?
Is that even possible within the universe's fundamental rules? Or is it truly inherently defined by this unending, inescapable tapestry of conflict? It's a pretty chilling question to leave you with.
Indeed it is. Keep digging into this dark, vast history, listener. There's always another layer, another secret, another ancient grudge waiting to be uncovered.